Why did Jasmine ask him for a number he refused to say out loud? Because the moment he admitted it, his entire argument collapsed, and she knew it. Before we break down how Jasmine Crockett cornered Repan Thompson with a single question that left him stammering in front of the entire Agriculture Committee, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because this confrontation is a masterclass in how to dismantle talking points with facts someone doesn't want to acknowledge. The House Agriculture Committee hearing room has a particular atmosphere that's different from the more famous judiciary or oversight committees. It's less about constitutional showdowns and more about policy in the weeds, crop subsidies, conservation programs, and nutrition assistance. The Farm Bill debates happen here. Massive pieces of legislation that affect everything from corn prices in Iowa to food stamps in Philadelphia. Most of the time, these hearings are technical and wonky, the kind of thing that agriculture lobbyists follow closely. But that rarely makes national news. But every once in a while, when the politics of food assistance collide with broader debates about government spending and who deserves help, these hearings can become flashpoints. Today was shaping up to be one of those days. The committee was debating the Republican Farm Bill proposal, and the tension in the room was palpable from the opening statements. Democrats were accusing Republicans of hiding massive cuts to SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, which most people still call food stamps, behind technical language and budget accounting tricks. Republicans were insisting that their bill was cost-neutral, that they were simply making the program more efficient, and that accusations of cuts were Democratic fear-mongering designed to score political points. Repiglin G.T. Thompson sat near the center of the Republican side, looking confident and prepared. The Pennsylvania congressman had been on the Agriculture Committee for years, had chaired it during the last Republican majority, and considered himself an expert on farm policy and nutrition programs. He'd been one of the primary architects of the Republican Farm Bill proposal, and he'd spent the morning defending it with the practiced ease of someone who thought he understood the issues better than his critics. Thompson had just finished a statement about how the Republican proposal would strengthen SNAP for those who truly need it while eliminating waste and fraud. When Jasmine Crockett, sitting several seats down on the Democratic side, raised her hand for recognition, the committee chairman looked slightly reluctant. He could probably sense this wasn't going to be a friendly exchange and acknowledged her. Crockett didn't ease into it. "Mr. Thompson, I've been listening to you and your colleagues talk all morning about how your farm bill doesn't cut SNAP and how it's just about efficiency and integrity, but I'm looking at the Congressional Budget Office analysis of your proposal, and it tells a very different story. So, I have a simple question. According to CBO, how much does your bill reduce SNAP spending over 10 years? Thompson shifted slightly in his seat, the confidence flickering just for a moment. "Well, Congresswoman, the CBO score is based on certain assumptions." "That's not what I asked." Crockett interrupted smoothly. "I asked for the number. CBO analyzed your bill. They calculated the reduction in SNAP spending." "What's the number?" Thompson tried a different approach. "The bill is designed to be cost-neutral overall by reallocating resources." "Mr. Thompson." Crockett's voice was patient but firm, like a teacher asking a student to answer the actual question rather than the one they wished had been asked. "I'm not asking about overall cost neutrality. I'm asking specifically about SNAP, the CBO number. How much does your bill cut from SNAP over 10 years? The room was getting quieter. Other committee members were paying closer attention now. Thompson looked at the Republican staff director as if hoping for some procedural intervention. But none came. He was going to have to answer. The CBO projection shows a reduction of approximately $30 billion. $30 billion, Crockett repeated, making sure everyone heard it clearly. "So when you've been saying all morning that there are no cuts to SNAP, what you actually mean is there's a $30 billion reduction. But you're calling it something else. Is that accurate?" Thompson's face was starting to redden. "Congresswoman, you're mischaracterizing the policy. We're not cutting benefits for people who are truly eligible. You're cutting $30 billion from the program," Crockett said flatly. "That's not a characterization. That's math. CBO says your bill reduces SNAP spending by $30 billion over 10 years. That's a cut. You can dress it up with language about eligibility and efficiency, but the bottom line is $30 billion fewer dollars going to help people afford food. Why can't you just say that plainly?" Thompson tried to pivot to his prepared talking points about work requirements and able-bodied adults, but Crockett wasn't letting him escape. Mr. Thompson, let me ask you something else. You represent Pennsylvania's 15th district. Is that correct? Thompson nodded wearily, clearly uncertain where this was going. Rural district, lots of small towns, some economically struggling areas. Crockett continued, what percentage of your constituents rely on SNAP benefits? Do you know? Thompson hesitated. I'd have to look at the exact numbers. Let me help you out, Crockett said, pulling up data on her tablet. According to USDA statistics, approximately 14% of your district receives SNAP benefits. That's higher than the national average. In fact, rural districts like yours tend to have higher SNAP utilization rates than many urban districts. So, when you cut $30 billion from SNAP, you're cutting a program that disproportionately helps your own constituents. Does that seem like good representation to you? The Democratic side of the committee was starting to look energized. The Republican side looked uncomfortable. Thompson was visibly struggling to formulate a response that didn't sound like he was arguing against helping his own district. Well, our bill includes provisions that help rural communities. Your bill cuts $30 billion from SNAP, Crockett repeated, not letting him change the subject. I'm not asking about other provisions. I'm asking about the specific impact of cutting food assistance when your district relies on that program more than most. How do you justify that to constituents who are going to lose benefits? Thompson tried another angle, one that Republicans often used when backed into corners on spending issues. Congresswoman, I appreciate your concern for fiscal responsibility. Perhaps you could explain how Democrats plan to address the massive national debt that programs like SNAP contribute to. It was a trap question, an attempt to paint Crockett and Democrats as fiscally reckless for opposing cuts. But Crockett had been waiting for exactly this deflection, and her response was devastating. Oh, you want to talk about the national debt? Let's talk about it, Ms. Thompson. How much did the national debt increase during the Trump administration? Thompson looked trapped. I don't have those figures in front of me. Let me help you again, Crockett said, her tone making clear she'd come prepared for exactly this line of argument. The national debt increased by approximately $8 trillion during the Trump administration. $8 trillion. And you voted for the policies that caused most of that increase. The tax cuts that overwhelmingly benefited the wealthy and corporations. The spending increases that weren't offset. You voted for all of that. So please don't lecture me about fiscal responsibility while you're trying to take food assistance away from struggling families in your own district to pay for tax cuts you gave to billionaires. The room erupted in murmurs. Several Democratic members were nodding vigorously. Republican members were conferring urgently with staff, and Thompson looked like he desperately wanted to be anywhere else. He tried to respond with something about different economic circumstances and necessary investments, but his voice had lost the confident authority it had carried earlier. Crockett wasn't finished. Here's what I don't understand, Mr. Thompson. When we're talking about tax cuts for the wealthy, fiscal responsibility doesn't seem to matter. When we're talking about defense spending increases, fiscal responsibility doesn't seem to matter. But when we're talking about helping people, particularly poor people, particularly people in rural areas that your party claims to represent, suddenly we need to find cuts. Suddenly, $30 billion in food assistance is unaffordable. Why is that? Thompson tried to argue that the situations were different, that defense spending and tax policy couldn't be compared to nutrition assistance programs, but he was clearly on the defensive now, speaking in fragments rather than complete arguments. Crockett had taken control of the exchange completely. She pressed her advantage. Let me give you one more number to think about, Mr. Thompson. Do you know how much we spend annually on SNAP's total program cost? Thompson shook his head slightly, clearly unwilling to guess after being corrected on previous numbers. It's about $80 billion annually, Crockett said. Sounds like a lot, right? But that's less than 1% of the federal budget. 1% to help feed 40 million Americans, including millions of children, elderly people, and disabled individuals. And you're telling me we can't afford that. But we can afford to add $8 trillion to the debt through tax cuts for people who are already wealthy. She leaned forward, and when she spoke again, her voice carried both moral force and legal precision. Here's the reality, Mr. Thompson. SNAP isn't a handout. It's not wasteful spending. It's one of the most effective anti-poverty programs we have. It reduces food insecurity. It helps children perform better in school. It keeps families stable during economic hardship. The return on investment is actually positive. Every dollar spent on SNAP generates about $1.50 in economic activity. So cutting $30 billion from this program isn't fiscal responsibility. It's fiscal stupidity. It's harming your own constituents and your own district's economy to make an ideological point about government spending. Thompson attempted one final defense. Congresswoman, our bill simply ensures that people who can work do work. Your bill cuts $30 billion from food assistance. Crockett said her patients were clearly wearing thin. Stop hiding behind rhetoric about work requirements and just own what you're doing. You're taking food assistance away from people who need it. $30 billion worth. That's going to hurt people. It's going to hurt children. It's going to hurt elderly people. It's going to hurt people in your district. And no amount of talk about efficiency or integrity changes that basic fact. The silence that followed was profound. Thompson had no response left. He'd been systematically dismantled, his talking points exposed as hollow, and his fiscal responsibility argument revealed as hypocritical. His claim of no cuts is demolished by the simple fact that CBO said the bill cut $30 billion. He sat there visibly uncomfortable while Crockett gathered her papers with the calm satisfaction of someone who'd accomplished exactly what she'd set out to do. The committee chairman, sensing that this exchange had gone as badly as possible for the Republican side, quickly moved to recognize another member for questioning. But the damage was done. The narrative that Republicans had been carefully constructing all morning, that their farm bill was reasonable, that it strengthened SNAP rather than cutting it, that concerns about cuts were just Democratic exaggeration, had been completely destroyed by one Congresswoman asking simple questions and refusing to accept anything less than direct answers. Within hours, clips of the exchange were circulating widely. Crockett destroying Thompson on SNAP cuts was trending on political social media. Anti-hunger advocacy organizations were sharing the video with commentary about how this was exactly the kind of accountability they needed from members of Congress. Even some conservative commentators acknowledged that Thompson had been thoroughly outmaneuvered. Thompson's office released a statement later that day, claiming the exchange had been taken out of context and that the Congresswoman had misrepresented the Republican Farm Bill proposal. But the statement couldn't explain away the central fact that Crockett had established. CBO said the bill cut $30 billion from SNAP, and Thompson had admitted it. Everything else was just spin. For Jasmine Crockett, the confrontation was another example of her approach to congressional oversight. Come prepared with facts, ask direct questions, don't accept evasive answers, and force people to acknowledge realities they'd prefer to obscure. She hadn't needed to yell or perform outrage. She just needed to know her numbers better than her opponent did and be willing to pursue the truth, even when it was politically uncomfortable. In a follow-up interview, she was asked why she'd pressed Thompson so hard on the $30 billion figure. Her answer encapsulated why the exchange had been so effective. Because he was trying to convince people that cutting $30 billion from food assistance wasn't actually cutting $30 billion from food assistance. He was counting on people not paying close enough attention to notice the contradiction. My job is to pay attention and to make sure the public knows what's actually being proposed versus what's being claimed. $30 billion in cuts is $30 billion in cuts, no matter what you call it. And people deserve to know that before this bill gets voted on. If this breakdown of how Jasmine Crockett used simple math and persistent questioning to corner a congressman who thought he could hide cuts behind technical language showed you why preparation and precision matter in political debates, hit that like button and subscribe for more moments when accountability actually happens. Drop a comment telling us whether you think politicians should be allowed to claim no cuts when the CBO says there are cuts. And share this with anyone who needs to see how asking the right questions can expose what powerful people want to hide.